walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
So there's a rule in life that said you're either growing or you're dying. And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again.
Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion?
Greetings and welcome to the Lou Holtz Podcast. Before I get to our outstanding guest, Bubba Cunningham, the ultra-successful athletic director of North Carolina, let me reiterate once again the purpose of this podcast. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, whether you're white, black, yellow, any combination in between. This is not about politics. It's about restoring the culture of this country. I think the culture of a business or a country is absolutely critical. We've lost a lot of the treasures and pleasures that I enjoyed during my earlier years. So we're hoping to bring a light on this and what we have to do to change the culture. But let me get to my guest. Bubba Cunningham became the Carolina Director of Athletics in November 2011. He's accomplished numerous academic achievements, opened up multiple new facilities, won 21 national titles. What they've done academically is tremendous. More than 3,500 Carolina student athletes have been named to the ACC honor roll. In his 20 years as Division I Director of Athletics, Bubba was elected by his peers to be Vice Chairman of the NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Committee. In 2020, he earned the AD of the Year award from the National Association of College Athletic Directors. He is past president of NACDA and sat on the board of LEAD, an associate representing athletic directors from Division I. I could go on and on, but Bubba Cunningham, I think it's safe to say this guy's had tremendous success. I've known him since he was at Notre Dame. He came to Notre Dame out of Naples. Now, when you came to Notre Dame, Bubba, did you play any athletics at all?
I was on the golf team 1 year, Coach. I tried out freshman year, didn't make it. Tried out sophomore year, didn't make it. Tried out junior year and really didn't have a score to be on the team, but I cried in the coach's office and he put me on the team. So I was on for 1 year.
Well, you're only about 5'7", 5'8". I played basketball with you. You're an outstanding basketball player. You're an outstanding golfer. You're close to a scratch golfer. So it's amazing. How did you end up at Notre Dame from Naples, Florida?
You know, I got in kind of at the last minute. I had already made a deposit to go to Wake Forest, and ironically, I was hoping to go to Dartmouth and play basketball, but got into Notre Dame at the 11th hour, and my mom said, "Well, your sister went to Wake Forest. Why don't you try Notre Dame?" So I landed at Notre Dame, and it's been an absolutely great experience, and met my wife there, and just as you know, we stayed there and worked for a long time and met great people. And really enjoyed our experience. So I was very fortunate that I got in and had such a good experience while I was there.
Well, when you came to the University of Notre Dame, who was the AD that hired you?
Gene Corrigan. Gene was the AD that hired me. When I first came back, I left college. I went into public accounting down in Atlanta. I didn't like it at all. Moved back to Notre Dame and started working in the Alumni Association. I did that for 3 years. Then Gene Corrigan hired me as an intern in the athletic department. And then I became the ticket manager. So my first year in athletics, I was an intern. My second year, I was the ticket manager, which was 1988, which is a pretty good year to be the ticket manager at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Well, you had great success. I always enjoyed working with you. After getting your master's degree at Notre Dame, what led you to becoming an associate AD? Did you always want to work in college athletics?
You know, I didn't know anything about college athletics. I was fortunate enough to be on the golf team, fortunate enough to work at Notre Dame while I was a student. Actually, my senior year, instead of playing golf, I ran senior bar. So I was over at senior bar. We hired the bartenders and had some great stories for you about some of your players that were over there frequenting the place at times. But some of the Golick boys were there at the time. Some were there currently. Some had already graduated. We had a good time with them, but just developed great relationships with folks on campus. And when I came back and worked in alumni, I realized how broad the university was and how important it was for everyone. But the sense of community was developed around athletics, and that's what brought people together. And I said, I'd really like to be a part of that. Got to know Gene Corrigan. Gene ultimately hired me into that position, and absolutely have fallen in love with working at a university, working in athletics. And by the way, I think you do know this. I've tried to tell you many times, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. For the time I was an assistant and had the opportunity to work with football and work with you in particular as we traveled around the country and got to learn what it was like to how someone ran a program and all the great messages that you communicated with the staff, with the students. I still use those today. And as I said, I would not be here today if it wasn't for you and the commitment that you had. I mean, when you first came in, you talked about love, trust, and commitment. And that's what you built the foundation of that program on. And I still think about all the messages and the lessons that you were teaching at that point.
Well, you humble me, but we're on this show to talk about you, not to talk about Lou Holtz, but I appreciate it. Since becoming Carolina's AD in 2011, what's been the biggest changes you've made?
I don't know if I've made any changes. I think the industry has changed. And like you, when you were coaching, what I tried to do is I've tried to change how we operate just from a administrative standpoint. I still think the values instilled upon us from the start is most important. We have our mission in intercollegiate athletics at North Carolina is that we educate and inspire through athletics. And when I first left Notre Dame and I went to Ball State, our mission was that we enhance the educational experience of all students, not just the ones that play. And I think if I go back to my experience in the Alumni Association, we understand that athletics is the front porch, as a lot of people talk about it. But if we don't add value to the university, then we shouldn't exist. So our fundamental purpose is to make that educational experience better. And a lot of the coaches do it through their daily contact with students. But the alumni come back. The people are attracted to universities because they're a sense of pride in their athletic programs. And we need to make sure people are very prideful of what we do and how we represent the university.
What we're doing at Carolina is thinking about the student athlete first, the university, and how do we represent this university with an incredible athletics program.
So while the economics have changed, the visibility, the commercial activity, all of that has changed. But what's most important to us is, are we delivering on the promise of getting a great education at a great place while allowing these students to excel athletically in the sport that they love?
Well, you're really talking about the culture of your university, and that's what we're talking about here, the culture of this country. In your 15 years at North Carolina as AD, what's been your proudest moment?
Well, I don't know if I have the proudest moment. I said the most exhilarating thing, and you're going to think this is silly. I mean, as you articulated, we won some national championships, and those coaches and the kids have been fantastic. But the thing that gives me goosebumps when I think back on it was an ACC women's fencing championship. There was nobody in the arena, myself and Larry Gallo, who you probably remember from Notre Dame, and a handful of parents of our fencers were there. And we generally don't have a very good fencing program. And somehow or another, we were tied for first with Duke and Notre Dame, and they called a fence-off. Never even heard of a fence-off. And so you take the three weapons and you then have a fence-off. And somehow or another, we won the championship, and the kids were so excited. And our coach, who had never won a fencing championship, it was his 50th year that he won the championship.
Oh my.
And those kinds of things are just fill yourself with joy of seeing the exuberant celebration of these players and this coach.
They should be able to do it, and that's exactly what they did. That's why you play a sport. You don't want to lose. You don't want to be second best. You want to do the best you can. Hard to talk, hard to breathe, but that's the way it should be. It should never be commonplace. It should never be something you take for granted. even more so today. Last set of dual meets, last tournament for me. So it's great. It's the way, again, that's the way it should be.
It was just, it felt so great to see that. And those are the kind that, that's why you do it.
It makes me miss athletics. You talk about that. We had a great fencing coach at the University of Notre Dame who also was in charge of our athletics. And he kept coming by and said, "You got to come watch a fencing match." He said, "It's right next to your office." So one day I went out and I watched the fencing match and went back to the office. As soon as it was over, he's in my office. I said, "What'd you think?" I said, "It was interesting, but I ain't coming back until you use real swords." I said, "I can't tell who wins." I said, "You use real swords. I definitely tell who won and who lost on that." But you've had thousands of athletes come through your university. What's the most impressive athlete you've seen?
Gosh, you're right. There are so many. I'm now fortunate to work at the University of North Carolina, and you have the Michael Jordans and the Mia Hamms and the Heather O'Reillys. It's just the competitive nature of those, and you've seen it yourself, and all the people that you have coached. There's a relentless ability to compete, and it doesn't matter what it is. They can't stop competing. And I think back to those Gatorade commercials when Michael and Mia were doing that together, and I can do it better than you, and it never stops.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Had enough?
Let's go. Anything you can be, I can be greater.
Ready, stop.
Sooner or later, I'm greater than you.
No, you're not. I'm not stopping.
Yes, I am.
I'm not stopping.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
And they do get back to campus, and they're always delightful when they're here. But I'd have to say those two are right up there as the greatest athletes I've ever seen.
Well, you've hired so many great coaches. For the younger coaches out there, what are the qualities you look for when you're hiring a coach?
That's a great question. That is a great question, because this past year I did something I never thought I would do. We won the national championship in field hockey in December, and in January I hired our best player to be the coach, and she was 22 years old. And there was something about her that just absolutely stood out. A phenomenal player, but a great leader that the kids bought into. So she's coached 1 year now, and she won a national championship in her very first year.
The youngest coach in NCAA Division I sports this year just took home a national championship. Amna Navas spoke earlier this week with the rookie head coach of the Tar Heels field hockey team about the victory that redefines what a player turned coach can achieve.
As a player on the University of North Carolina's field hockey team, Erin Mattson made history. She was a 3-time National Player of the Year and a 4-time national champion. Then, 2 months after graduating in 2022, Mattson was named head coach of that same team. Now 23 years old, in her first season at the helm, the NCAA's youngest Division I coach led the Tar Heels to yet another national title.
So between hiring Erin Mattson as our field hockey coach at 22 and Mack Brown at 70, I've got a very wide range of ages of people that coach. But every one of them have a special quality and a charisma that attracts people and motivates them to be successful. And I tell you, every search is very different, and you just cross your fingers and hope that you have the right one to lead your program. But as long as they have great value and great character, that's what's going to lead to ultimate success, I believe.
Well, it's very difficult to hire a basketball coach at North Carolina when you've had so many great ones in the past, but you're doing very, very well. Now, you've won 21 national titles since you've been at University of North Carolina. What do you think has been the greatest contributor to the success in North Carolina? I know you can say it's the coaches and the players, but there's something about North Carolina, because what people don't realize, you're 5 minutes from Duke, and you're 10 minutes away from North Carolina State. I coached the state, and North Carolina was always on your marquee. That's a key game. It didn't matter what else, playing Carolina. So it's been very, very difficult. But what has been, do you think, the reason that the Carolina has been so successful?
Well, I think that's why you have your show, Coach. I think it's culture. And I think the culture of a place is determined by individuals who have the ability to instill that sense of pride and community in the entire place. I know Notre Dame, certainly the culture at Notre Dame was built on Father Hesburgh for the entire university. But I do know that the culture of success and championships at Notre Dame was built with you and your continuation of Coach Parseghian, Coach Devine, and yourself. Those coaches build it. And so at North Carolina, it was Coach Smith. Coach Smith had, play hard, play smart, play together. And he always went to every athletic event across campus. We had a situation at one point in our basketball gym where we had a volleyball coach who wanted to drill holes in the court and put in volleyball stanchions because that's where they needed to play and practice. And they went to Coach Smith and said, we'd like to do this. And he said, do you think it'll have any impact on the basketball program or any way adversely affect our players? And they said, no. And he said, if it's good for volleyball, then we'll do it. And so that sense of this is good for everybody, I think is what has permeated this culture here, and our coaches support each other. When I first got here, Coach, we had 9 of our head coaches that have won national championships. And I think it's because they share that sense of commitment to each other and what they're going to do. And as I mentioned at the outset, love, trust, and commitment are the three pillars that you built Notre Dame on, and I think those are here at North Carolina as well.
You talk about culture of North Carolina and Notre Dame. We're also talking about the culture of this country, but you keep going back to the doing the right thing, doing the best you can, caring about one another, having a sense of purpose, and following your rules. And that's all we're trying to get this country back to doing those things. But once again, this is not a political show. But according, how have these NIL opportunities affected your program? Because NIL has changed completely, as has the transfer portal. These are things I don't think are good for intercollegiate athletes. I don't think they're good for an athlete either, Bubba, because you go to a school, you choose the school because that's where you want your diploma from. That's where you want to be associated from. And you learn to wait your time and be patient and improve. And when the opportunity comes, you step up. But with a transfer portal, good Lord knows, Bubba, we have quarterbacks starting for 4 different schools in 4 years, and that's not an exaggeration. Then the NIL. I never had money growing up. People say you need a haircut. I don't look in the mirror. I looked in my wallet. So I never had enough money, but nobody ever did. But now we're paying athletes and we're doing all these other things. Is that good for intercollegiate athletes? Is that good for the country? Is that good for our future?
Well, I do think that I don't want to be the grumpy old guy because I've got a lot of runway ahead of me in college athletics. The economic model is certainly changing. The commercial activity in sport has been growing astronomically in the last 20 years. So now I think our challenge is how do we figure out what is the new economic model and how do we share the money? We've always had a revenue sharing model in college athletics. Football and basketball generated all the money and we shared it with all 26 or 27 other sports in the department. Now we're suggesting that if you play a sport that generates the money, you should get more of it. I think there's good things to that because I do think there's risks, there's health risks and things associated with these sports. And I think the commercial activity is significant enough now that you can share it. I do worry about the long-term health of our Olympic sport programs, and the colleges are the feeders to the Olympic movement, which is something that this country is very concerned about. So I think we're trying to work our way through the environment. And government is now more involved in college athletics than it ever has before. The Supreme Court has ruled that we're in violation of antitrust twice. The National Labor Relations Board, which is governed by the executive branch, and now the legislative branch is what we're trying to get an antitrust exemption for. So our country needs to embrace college athletics and figure out a better economic model that will feed the Olympic system, somehow compensate students that are participating in sports, but maintain the Olympic sports that we currently have. I don't particularly think it's in a great position right now, but the next 2 or 3 years will be very turbulent. We've got to figure out a way because it's too important to our country and to our schools to not have successful programs.
I agree with you completely on that line and how important it is. But explain to me how the ACC takes teams in from the West Coast and how that's good.
I'm not a big fan of that, but I think that we're going to have to figure out how to do that. I do think we need a national governing body. I do think that Congress is likely to have to step in, which is, I can't believe I would say that we do need a national governing body with national standards. And as long as the national governing body is being attacked through the courts, we have to have some protection that the rules will stand up. The NIL rule, the transfer portal, all of those are because of court cases.
I agree with you. That's something that not many people think about, Bubba, is all the difficult judicial cases that come up because of athletics. And I think much of our problem rests in Washington because they make all these rules without thinking of what the purpose we had. We really initially went to college athletics because it's the greatest learning lesson you can have. I learned more on a football field than I ever learned in a college classroom. And the thing about it was that you went there and you understood about perseverance, about unselfishness, about teamwork, about working with other people. All these things are great lessons, and we're starting to take it away from it. That's my personal point of view, looking at it from afar. But tell me, what was it like raising 4 children at the same time you were busy as an athletic director? I know that's not an easy job, but I know that you've been very successful. And as I've said before, I was told many years ago, I don't care what you accomplish in this world, if you aren't successful as a husband or father, you failed. I know you've been ultra successful in that. Tell me about the secret and your 4 children.
Well, the secret is, as you know better than I, or maybe I know as well as you at this point in my life, the secret is finding a spouse that's willing to support you. And Beth was an absolutely master at running your family. Tina and I got married right out of college. We've got 4 great kids. And you tried to ruin their Christmas because 11 straight years you went to a New Year's Day bowl and we left on Christmas Day to go to a bowl game. And that is, college athletics, it is 24/7, but the best thing about it is your family can participate with the highs and the lows. So our Christmases, we're going to those bowl games. It still is, whether it's a bowl game or a Final Four, we get together in those athletic events, and that's what brings our family together. So, and you see it. There's people that are in sports. They're positive, they're enthusiastic, they have goals, they attain those goals, they're competitive. That's what drives a sense of community, and that's what drives our family. And you were a big, big part of that.
Well, I tell you what, it's because we had good people around us, but also because of the culture of the university, the culture of the program. As I said, a football team, basketball team, a business goes through 4 different stages. Stage number 1, they learn how to be competitive. You learn how to be competitive because you do the fundamentals. You block, you tackle, you protect the basketball, you rebound, etc. Number 2, you learn how to win. And you learn how to win, Bubba, I think, because you do little things the right way. Everybody does the big thing. But then you go through stage 3, you learn how to handle winning. Because once you start winning, everybody thinks that's automatic, and everybody wants credit, and everybody stops working. Everybody starts waving the flag. And then you go through stage 4, and that's where you develop the culture of the team. And when the players take charge of the culture, that's when everything goes well. Because they don't wait for the head coach to correct the freshmen on how we do things. That's not just the way we do things along that line. But you've had unbelievable success. What is the main reason, would you say, you've had success other than your wife?
Well, again, it's the people I've been around. Coach, you're one of them. Father Bill Beauchamp, Father Malloy. The people, the mentors, Chuck Lennon in the Alumni Association, my president at Ball State, the president I had at Tulsa, the chancellors we've had at North Carolina, the coaches I've been with. It's all those people that you associate with. And you talked about that to your team in so many years. It's just, you're only as good as the people that you hang around with. And I've been very fortunate to be with great individuals on these great, wonderful campuses. And you're inspired by these student athletes. The ambition, the enthusiasm that they bring is absolutely phenomenal. And, we've got a couple of your former players' kids on our team, and they've played here. And it's always, our smiles get bigger when we think about the experience that we had with you.
Well, all we tried to do is follow those 3 rules. But the last 2 questions I want to ask you, Bubba, would you change anything if you had to do over again? And how much of a relationship did you have with Dick Rosenthal?
Had a lot. Dick, so Gene Corrigan left shortly after he hired me, and then Dick Rosenthal came in, and Dick said, hey, I like what you're doing as an intern, and we're going to make that job full-time. If you'd like it, it's yours. And so he gave me my first full-time job, and Dick and his family and Beth were absolutely fantastic individuals. And I think the relationships that I built, every Friday night before home games, he had a bunch of people over at his house. And occasionally you would show up, but it was a game night before the game, so I would understand that. But I still have relationships with the people that I've met from NBC and from other schools all across the country that came in for those Friday night events at Dick's house. So I have a great debt of gratitude to Dick for his launching my career and allowing me to do the things that I've been able to do.
Well, there were two great athletic directors. Gene Corrigan certainly was, and later went on. He left Notre Dame to go become a commissioner of the ACC and did a great job there. And then, of course, Dick Rosenthal. I've been there 1 year when Gene Corrigan felt he should go. It was a great opportunity for him. And Dick Rosenthal said they offered me the head coach, athletic director at Notre Dame, but I don't want to take it if I don't think we can work together. I said, take it. We'll have a lot of laughs. We'll have a lot of agony and pain, which we did, but that's all part of it growing up. But as we wind this show down, Bubba, the thing this show is coaching America back to greatness. What do you think really needs to be done to bring America back where our values and our culture? When I was growing up, it was, obey the law, follow the rules, care about other people, help other people along the line. Those were the things that I believe, but I see us losing that stuff. What do you think we have to do to get back to that?
I will answer that question, but I want to go back to when you got hired before we do that. I remember very distinctly when you got hired, some of those things were absolutely priceless. I remember you came down from Minnesota and you said you absolutely loved it up there in Minnesota because everybody up there had blonde hair and blue ears. And I thought that was absolutely priceless. And then you got some instructions before you went to your press conference from Father Joyce. And Father Joyce said, Coach, we don't want to talk about salaries. And you responded and said, of course we're not going to talk about salaries. I'm as embarrassed about it as you are.
They paid me $95,000. Now you're paying coaches $8-9 million. The most I made at Notre Dame was $115. That was after we signed the NBC contract, went to 9 straight major bowls. The list goes on and on, but that's all part of life. But, you can't buy happiness, but it all has a way of working it out. But what are the things
what I learned from you, and you've said this all the time, and I've written it down and taken it. 30 years ago, all we had talked about as a country were what are our responsibilities and our obligations.
Amen.
Today, all people want to talk about are their rights and their privileges, and we've got to be able to think about what are my responsibilities? What can I do to make this place better? I have obligations, given the position I am, to do things, and I need to do that. Not thinking about what are my rights and my privileges. What can I do to help somebody else? As Coach Wooden said, and it's one of my favorite quotes, is you can't live a perfect day until you help somebody that cannot repay you. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to think about what can we do to make the place better. And that's what we're trying to instill in our folks here at Carolina.
Boy, that's very well put. And, that was one of my favorite sayings all the time, but the difference between athletes today and 30 years ago. Today, everybody wants to talk about their rights and their privileges. 30 years ago, we talked about our obligation, responsibilities. And if we did that again, I think we could bring the culture of this country back. But I can't thank you enough, Bubba. You bring back so many great memories. As I said, we played a lot of golf together. And not many people know we played bookstore basketball. There were 800 teams. There were 5 on a team, single elimination, 800 teams. And I was on your team, and you were a great basketball player. We also had Tony Ray, so I might add, and we got to the final championship game. And I tried to guard Tim Brown, I did, and they had a basketball player who played in the NBA I took a charge on. What was his name?
Kenny Barlow. And we got the opening tip, and you're saying, all right, I'm going to cover Tim Brown, the Heisman Trophy winner, because he won't embarrass me. You're going to cover Tim Brown. It's okay, good luck. And you're wearing khaki pants, a V-neck sweater, and a polo shirt like you got on right today. And you had a pipe in your back pocket.
Well, I got to tell you this. My wife after that game said, you know, you do fine when you play against the engineers. When you get against the athletes, you embarrass yourself. And I never played again after we got to the final. But, Bubba, it's just been a pleasure to be with you. Congratulations on your great success. I followed you from afar. I'm not surprised. I'm very pleased. Thank you for joining us on this show. God bless you.
Thank you, Coach.
And he walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
So there's a rule in life that you're either growing or you're dying.
And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again.
Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion?